Hi there. February is Black History Month. It's a time of celebration, reflection, and education. Carter G. Woodson is recorded as the father of Black history. And he stated, "Those who have no record of what their forebears have accomplished lose the inspiration that comes from the teaching of biography and history." I believe if we can remember our history and appreciate our history, we can forecast a better destiny and legacy. Carter G. Woodson recognized that. He not only was the father of Black history, but he was born in 1875 to slaves. Woodson was unable to attend school at an early age, and he didn't begin high school until age 20. He became the second African American to earn a doctorate degree from Harvard. If often we're in Black history, we don't learn about things until there's an event that happens. But Black history is designed to teach us the hidden gems that we may be able to recognize and celebrate the Black legends, leaders, and everyday Black people, the brilliance, resilience, the courage, the dogged determination, and the vast and significant contributions made to American life for centuries by Black people. I'm here today because Martin Luther King's quote so inspired me, and the Lord captured my heart and motivated me and compelled me to no longer be silent, but to speak up. In the words of the late Dr. Martin Luther King, there comes a time when one must take a position that's neither safe, nor political, nor popular, but he must take it because conscience tell him it is right. This is the right time, and this is the time for us to move out and cry out for justice for all people, but in particularly for Black people. Welcome. I'm Charlene Glover, the CEO of We Need a Village Again. We are better together, aka WANAVA. WANAVA is a social justice ministry. So to learn more, visit us at wanava.com. I'm your host for the 2024 Black History Program. We've curated this Black History Program with these objectives in mind. Number one, to educate every person who wants to learn the truth about Black and African American life. Number two, to hopefully break the yokes and the stigmas of shame and condemnation from the minds of many African Americans. Number three, to counter the ignorance of ill-intending leaders that says that slavery has had a benefit to those that was enslaved. That's not true, that's a lie, and it is also inhumane. And that slavery was an involuntary relocation. That's also false and not true. We've intentionally entitled our program this year the Imago Day 2024 Black History Program, honoring Black legends, recognizing contemporary leaders, and spotlighting emerging history makers. Imago Day is found in Genesis 1:26. It is actually a theological principle that speaks to the likeness and image of God, that all humans are created. Genesis 1:26 says, "Then God said, let us make man in our image according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So the principle of the Imago Day is that every human being was created in the image and likeness of Almighty God, which also dispels and negates the idea that there is a superior people group and an inferior people group. The truth is, all people are created from the good stuff. Out of God's creation came all human race, excuse me. Out of God's creation came the human race. So we're all valid, we're all significant, and we're all superior in the mind of God. Imago Day speaks to you, me, and every skin tone of people. There is no difference in your quality or your essence in God's mind. Unfortunately, in the world we live in, there are those that demean, belittle, or marginalize because it makes them feel more powerful. In our Truth Telling Black History program, we want every person who's felt oppressed, discouraged, overwhelmed, overlooked, or discounted to be lifted up to know that you are the Imago Dei of Almighty God, created in the image and likeness of Almighty God. Now, throughout the next 6 weeks or throughout the 6 weeks broadcast, we're going to spotlight extraordinary African American achievements and contributions across many disciplines such as inventions, medical pioneers, computer technology, engineering, legal trailblazers, and youth inventions, along with AI. So I hope you're going to plan to join us throughout the entire program. And then we have a special edition on February the 27th. We're going to feature 2 certified Ghana African tourist guides, Emmanuel and Israel. They will take us on a virtual tour of some of the most iconic sites in Africa. You don't want to miss this incredible learning opportunity. Check us out on our social media platforms weekly for enlightening and inspiring content. Now, for this program, this segment, we're going to focus in on civil rights. Civil rights is very, very important. It is the shoulders of many that we stand upon. Even though the fight is still today and even fierce today, many have given their lives so that Black people could have equal rights in America. While Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., his contribution to the civil rights movement is most widely acknowledged and known, it is also important to recognize the pivotal roles of other civil rights activists. I want to focus in this segment on Dr. Martin Luther King and on Fannie Lou Hamer. The civil rights movement was a struggle for social justice and took place mainly during the 1950s and 60s for Black Americans to gain equal rights under the law in the United States. The Civil War officially abolished slavery, but it didn't end discrimination against Black people. They continued to endure devastating effects of racism, especially in the South, which is still alive today, unfortunately. By the mid-20th century, Black Americans, along with many other Americans, mobilized and began an unprecedented fight for equality that spanned 2 decades. Actually, there have been civil rights enacted throughout the United States, starting in 1866 through 1987, and still legislation on the books that are to be enacted. The 1964 Civil Rights Act, President Lyndon B. Johnson, after the assassination of President Kennedy, along with Dr. Martin Luther King in this image, are signing the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And that was a landmark legislation. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, which ended segregation in public places and banned employment discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin, is considered one of the crowning legislative achievements of the civil rights movement, first proposed by President John F. Kennedy. It survived strong opposition from Southern members of the Congress and was signed into law by Kennedy's successor, Lyndon B. Johnson. In subsequent years, Congress expanded the act and passed additional civil rights legislation as the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It was in 1965 in the Selma Montgomery March. Let's take a look at a quick video and see the imagery of that.
The 1965 Selma to Montgomery March was the climactic event of the Selma voting rights movement. On February 18th, Jimmy Lee Jackson was shot and killed by police during demonstrations in Marion. Infuriated by Jackson's shooting, Hosea Williams and John Lewis led some 600 Black protesters on March 7th across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. They were blocked by state troopers, Dallas County Sheriff's deputies, and mounted deputized men. Amidst billowing tear gas, law enforcement beat the marchers back across the bridge. As a result of this event, which became known as Bloody Sunday, Martin Luther King called for sympathetic Americans to join him in Selma to renew the march. On March 21st, King led a diverse group of 8,000 demonstrators out of Selma under the protection of the National Guard and federal marshals along U.S. Highway 80. On March 25th, King addressed 25,000 from the front of the state capitol. The national publicity that the march generated played a significant role in U.S. Congress adopting the Voting Rights Act of 1965.
It was after the Civil War, the 15th Amendment, ratified in 1870, prohibited states from denying a male citizen the right to vote based on race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Nevertheless, in the ensuing decades, various discriminatory practices were used to prevent African Americans, particularly in the South, from exercising their right to vote. During the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s, voting rights activists in the South were subjected to various forms of mistreatment and violence. One event that outraged many Americans occurred on March 7, 1965, when peaceful participants in the Selma to Montgomery March for Voting Rights met, as we saw, by the Alabama state troopers who attacked them with nightsticks, tear gas, and whips after they refused to turn back. Some protesters were severely beaten and bloody, often ran for their lives. The incident was captured on national television. This incident awakened the conscience, shocked the conscience, shocking the conscience of many of those. President Johnson called for comprehensive voting rights legislation in a speech to a joint session of Congress on March 15, 1965, 59 years ago this year. The president outlined the various ways in which election officials denied African Americans, the citizens, the vote. He outlined those devious ways in which election officials denied African American citizens the right to vote. We're seeing that reenacted today, unfortunately. Let's take a look at that celebration, the ceremony, August 6, 1965, the Voting Rights Act. So we had the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and now the August 6, 1965 Voting Rights Act. The ceremony with President Johnson, Dr. King, Rosa Parks, and others. Actually, it was the bus boycott with Rosa Parks that sparked this particular civil rights movement. The Voting Rights Act of 1965, signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson, aimed to overcome legal barriers at the state and local levels that prevented African Americans from exercising their rights to vote as guaranteed under the 15th Amendment to the United States Constitution. The Voting Rights Act is considered one of the most far-reaching pieces of civil rights legislation in the U.S. history. Now, Dr. Martin Luther King went on, and you will hear this in his writings and in his videos in the years to come. He stated frequently that the beloved community, a world in which a shared spirit of compassion brings an end to the evils of racism, poverty, inequality, and violence as the end goal of his activist efforts. That goal has not been attained. And I think it's clear by the video and by the legislation that change that is necessary for people never happens individually. It requires a collective force and mobilization and a collective will to be able to bring about change that affects a society. Dr. Martin Luther King was a change agent, and he was able to garner people of various ethnicities and various socioeconomic ways of living to fight for civil rights, in particularly civil rights for the African American and voting rights for the African American. So now I'm going to turn your attention to Fannie Lou Hamer. Fannie Lou Hamer is another civil rights icon that's not always recognized until it's Black History Month. However, she was born on October 6, 1917. She died in March 14, 1977. She was originated from Ruleville, Mississippi. So she experienced all of what happens and has happened and is still happening in Mississippi. Hamer is named amongst those who were instrumental in laying the foundation for securing and maintaining the right to vote for African Americans, culminating in the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Let's take a look at a video. It's about 12 minutes long, but it's worth every minute that you're going to watch it with me.
One of 20 children, a very poor family, sharecroppers in the state of Mississippi. I know what it's like to be hungry. I know what it's like to be without clothes. I know what it's like to be without food. To live in a 3-room house with no washroom facilities, just a 3-room shack. So in my earliest childhood, I remember one day I was playing beside this road and the landowner drove up and he asked me, could I pick cotton? And I told him I didn't know. I didn't know. At 6 years old, I just didn't know. So he told me, I want you to go out in the field, Fanny, and I want you to pick 30 pounds of cotton. And if you pick 30 pounds of cotton in a week, I'll carry you to my commissary store and I'll let you get some of the things that you want to eat. So don't you like Cracker Jack? That was exciting because I'd never had them. So I went out in the field and I told my parent. And my mother asked me, did I want to try it? And I told her I did. And she told me, said, now, we won't let you cheat. If you pick it, we'll say you picked it. But if you don't pick it, you don't get it. So this made me work very hard. But that week I did pick 30 pounds of cotton. That Saturday, the landowner did keep his promise. He carried me to this commissary store. He gave me some Cracker Jacks and cheese and the daddy wide leg sardines. But I didn't realize what he was doing other than that, because the next week I was tasked 60 pounds of cotton. By the time I was 13 years old, I was picking 200 and 300 pounds of cotton.
I am 17 years old. I pick 300 pounds of cotton a day.
I am 9 years old. I help my mother pick cotton. I pick 100 by day.
I am 14 years old. And I help my mother pick cotton. I can pick about 200 a day.
Now, at first, I really couldn't understand what it was that made us never have enough food. We worked all the time, but we never had enough to eat. We never had a chance to go to school. So my first reaction to my parent, especially to my mother, was to raise the question to her and ask her, how come we wasn't white? So in 1962, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee came into Roosevelt. That Monday night, I went over here, right around the corner here, to this church, William Chapel. And the pastor announced at the end of service that there would be a mass meeting that night, that Monday night. My husband drove me from out in the rural area where I had been working to the church. And when we got there and explained how it was our constitutional right to register and vote, and how it could change, the different laws, like if we didn't want a law in the town or what was going on, we could vote them out. So I thought it was the most remarkable thing that could happen in the state of Mississippi. I'd never heard until 1962 that black people could register and vote. I'd never even heard that was in the Constitution. I began from the first beginning August the 31st in 1962, that I traveled 26 miles to the county courthouse to try to register to become a first-class citizen. I was met by my children when I returned from the courthouse, and my girl and my husband's cousin told me that this man that we had worked for was raising a lot of cane. And about that time, the man walked up, Mr. Marlowe, and he said, "Is Fannie Lou back yet?" So my husband said, "She is." I walked out of the house at this time. He said, "Fannie Lou said, you've been to the courthouse to try to register, and we are not ready for this in Mississippi." I said, "Well, I didn't register for you. I tried to register for myself." He said, "We are not going to have this in Mississippi, and you will have to go down and withdraw." And he said, "I'm looking for your answer, yay or nay." So I just looked. And he said, "I'll give you to in the morning." And said, "If you don't go down and withdraw, you will have to leave. And if you do go down and withdraw, it's only how I feel. You still might have to go." So I left that same night. 10 days later, on the 10th of September, 16 bullets was fired into the home of Mr. and Mrs. Robert Tucker, the people that I had gone to live with.
Mrs. Hamer's presence at the 1962 SNCC conference in Nashville, where you could see for the first time, a local person from Mississippi reflecting exactly what you wanted to find in the rural South. It becomes clear we're dealing with somebody different. This is no submissive, docile, servile sharecropper. This is a woman of considerable strength.
When she stepped forward, I don't think anyone in SNCC realized how strong she was, and she may not have realized how strong she was.
Mrs. Hamer spoke before the Credentials Committee in 1964 in Atlantic City to let the Credentials Committee know that the integrated delegation should be seated as opposed to the old white guard. But Mrs. Hamer was chosen to speak because of the fire that was in her spirit, because of her articulation, and really because of her eyes.
It wasn't too long before 3 white men came to my cell. One of these men was a state highway patrolman. And he said, "We're going to make you wish you was dead."
When you looked into Mrs. Hamer's eyes, you knew she meant business. You knew that she had been through a lot, and just her very presence commanded respect.
I was carried out of that cell into another cell where they had 2 Negro prisoners. The state highway patrolman ordered the first Negro to take the blackjack. The first Negro began to beat. And I was beat by the first Negro until he was exhausted.
I was told that there were people on the Credentials Committee in tears when they listened to Mrs. Hamer tell her story.
After the first Negro had beat until he was exhausted, the state highway patrolman ordered the second Negro to take the blackjack. The second Negro began to beat, and I began to work my feet. And the state highway patrolman ordered the first Negro had beat to sit on my feet, to keep me from working my feet. I began to scream, and one white man got up and began to beat me in my head and tell me to hush. All of this is on account of we want to register to become first-class citizens. And if the Freedom Democratic Party is not seated now, I question America. Is this America, the land of the free and the home of the brave, where we have to sleep with our telephones off of the hook because our lives be threatened daily because we want to live as decent human beings in America? Thank you.
Fannie Lou Hamer died on March 14, 1977. She was 59 years old. Her good friend Charles McLaurin arranged for her burial on land she owned.
The reason she's buried where she's buried is that a few days before she passed away, and I went to visit her, and she said, Mac, promise me I will not be buried on a plantation. I've been on a plantation all my life, and I don't want to be buried. We have a commitment to keep her legacy alive. The statue was one way that she'd always be standing tall in the Delta. We set it up as high as it's setting so that people who come to the statue will be looking up at her.
It's the lifeline. Thinking about in terms of a better and a greater world for all people. And we can't do that by me in one corner doing what I can do to hurt you and you in the other corner doing the same thing against me. I'm not concerned about just representing black people because we have poor white that's in the same category with the poor Negro. Well, I want to see a change for the people. And if we can get a good white man, all right, we'll put him in office. But I don't want it all black and I don't want it all white. I've never thought in terms of violence, of all the things that have been gained by people fighting and going through blood for it. They don't have anything, you know. This, to me, it doesn't make sense. If I hate you because you hate me, I'm no better than you are. And all we want to do is to make these people understand that we are human beings and we can work together in this country. And to have a democracy, that's what we're going to have to do.
I hope you are not only touched, but compelled. My appeal to you is to become informed, to get involved, and exercise your right to say who represents you, who speaks for you, who leads you and your loved ones. It's imperative that we no longer sit back waiting for someone to help us, rescue us, or speak out for us without us being engaged and without us being involved. Let's listen to this. Let's follow in the path that's been carved out by the sweat, the tears, and the bloodshed of our ancestors, our contemporary leaders such as John Lewis and others, and legends both unsung and those that are just common people, everyday people who are fighting for justice and a more equitable society for all Blacks and all people who are disenfranchised or who are marginalized. Black history is not just about Black people. It's about humanity. It's about dignity. It's about the restoration of our humanity. The laws have been enacted, but now they must be carried out. They must be enforced. It will take, like with Fannie Lou Hamer, a collective effort and a dogged determination by all of those who are sick and tired of being sick and tired of being sick and tired. So the clarion call to you today is, despite our long history of oppression, regression, disappointments, and abuse, we must insist, we must persist and pursue the dreams and the legacy our ancestors have established for us, our lives, and for the generations to come. Fannie Lou Hamer demonstrated as an iconic civil rights activist, we need a village again because we are better together. It's more important how you finish than the fact that you just started. I'm asking you to join me because you too are the Imago Dei. Black brilliance, Black resilience at its finest is being spotlighted in this Black history moment. Join us for our continued program every Tuesday through March the 5th. We're going to be highlighting people from every category, every discipline in society, Blacks, African Americans, the contributions, the brilliance of how we have contributed to society, and in particularly to the American life. So if you like this content, find it inspiring and compelling, like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, share it with your friends, and stay tuned and get engaged. And then I ask you personally, would you pray for me as I'm advancing what I believe as an apostolic trail or an apostolic mission or commission towards justice in the United States of America for all those that have been mishandled and marginalized, oppressed and rejected, because God created every human being in his likeness and his image. Domination is evil. Dominion is what we're called to do. Thank you for joining us. I look forward to another segment with you on next week.